The hip-hop writer is a creator, composing understanding words of culture brilliance, powering a rebalance of the elements equally. Pages of rejuvenated reaffirmation. Simply the almighty leadership of insightful craft work that stands to build through any confrontation born to be. Yet his daily duty is as a journalist that questions properly, uses his ears for the good to filter the real, and as the art decays by dilution, he concentrates the best again and again, exposing it in the print. Today's journalist and tomorrow's historian he listens to share. Here is that necessary attempt executed again and again and again. Peace. This is the Power Right Show on S.STREET Media. This is your brother, the lone low life with the home-sewn garment. The Boricua with the build, the true and living, stepping in score, Sunez, a.k.a. Skillustrator Low. And we are on S.STREET Media, the evolution of media. Just some saviors off the streets who come to meet, greet, and talk the beat with you. And if you're looking for directions, though, it's left about 1,000 miles off the pavilion. So if you're ever looking for that, no perversion here. We're off that. But today's show is a little bit more of a lot of the bills that we've been having. And I want to give a shout out to everyone that goes to premierhiphop.com, reads any of the articles that I'm writing. There's a lot of pieces that I have loaded up, but I intend to make them a little bit more progressive, a little bit even more challenging as far as style-wise that we can even get to. But the essential core of what I'm saying here is what I am, what this element I'm representing as a hip-hop writer, a creative author, a documenting journalist, an honoring historian, is really to write art on art, creative works on the art that we are writing on, that we are witnessing, that we are experiencing, and science on music. That is a little bit of a deeper breakdown, though. Not telling you that the beat's hot, that it's fresh. Something a little bit deeper, though. You know, if we can, not just stating samples or anything like that, but really going into the reasons behind the music, the techniques, how things go together, what the artist was trying to do. And as I like to start out, I've gotten to a habit already of starting out some of these shows. I want to show you a little bit of art on art and show how this works, some appreciation. 1,000 times upon a block, or there once was a brown frown brother who, or a long rhyme ago in a bodega close by. Tales told of consequences, clashing on carcasses of characters, statements and scenes and commentaries and dialogues, and issues inside the tissues of endings, backdrops of whips, costumes of Timbs and galloping Ralph Lauren logos upon griots of gutter that break forth walls with faux foes. Just more words of happenings to beats clapping in, the rappers be rapping in. All apt to be amplified till the tale fades. The men who make moments sentences, prepare them into verses and orate them as break portraits. Our MCs of dystopian dialect amidst real motherfucking degradation. The foreign language that travels on snares, hi-hats, and bass pulses. My brother from the land of the setting pistol, click-clack, a script-shot projectile. Letters laid and mastered. Transcended blackness is the simple translation of this illness. Peace. That was actually a poetic intro I wrote for my brother out in UK, Cyrus Malachi. To the Triple Darkness crew, and that's one of what I think in this, what I call the invisible renaissance. I think Triple Darkness is one of the great crews. My brothers Ray Vendetta, Tesla the Ghost. I mean, they got a ton of guys. I think they got more members than Wu-Tang. You know what I mean? And they be shifting, increasing, decreasing, expanding daily. So it's hard to name them all, you know. But that was from Cyrus Malachi's last album, Dystopian Dialect. I think that was 2016. A shorter album than his other albums, but nonetheless heavy. And as always, though, the more I like an album, the more I tend to write longer prose and longer abstract thoughts on them, you know. And go check that album out, though. Go check the review. That's at premierhiphop.com. Before I continue, I want to give some shout outs. Everybody here at S.STREET Media, really doing their thing. I got to give a shout out to my brother the God Perception, who was here last week, and I didn't get to give him a shout. Check his I gotta see what his Twitter is. I think it's still God Perception, but he's an incredible MC, and he doesn't feel he's ready, but he really is on that next level though. So when he's ready to share with us a chunk of music, or ready to share most of his ideas and get some lyrics on the air, he'll definitely be on the air. But I was given this this article by my brother the other day, one of my brothers, and it was, let me see if I could pull it up too. I think it was from Ebony. It was about Wynton Marsalis, though. Well, by the way, Wynton Marsalis, though, because we talk about all the genres here because they all blend and make hip hop. And I give you some of my biases. My biases are in the crates, and as a collector, I collect probably 0% from anything past 1970 something. So there's no jazz in my collection that goes past 1970. Most of it, I feel like my favorite golden era was the 50s, obviously, with that peak of the late 50s where Miles was making all those albums with Bill Evans, the Kind of Blue, the Sketches of Spain. I mean, these are mind-blowing albums, though. You learn something about them every day, when you listen to them. And but of course, all the other legends, all the other eras, you can't have a jazz collection without significant Duke, significant amounts of Louis Armstrong, significant amounts of Thelonious Monk, all those guys. But Wynton Marsalis, there's no hate. I just don't collect past a certain era. I do that with most non-hip hop genres. I tend to get stuck in certain eras, though. A lot of them, obviously, because we're hip hop, so we get stuck in certain eras. So, if we're collecting soul music, though, we tend to get stuck in the 70s. It just so happens that the reality of the 70s, because somebody had asked this question too. I saw on a Facebook, I think it was the guy Ruler Divine, just as a Facebook question. What was the greatest era of music? And some kids said 90s, though, which is the worst answer. That's the decade of the best hip hop music. But hip hop wouldn't exist if it didn't have an incredible decade to mine. And that to me is the 70s. All the musics that we saw, they really flourished in the 70s. But I'll get back to that because there's another feature that we have for today's show that I'm going to get back to, a specific genre of the 70s. But Wynton Marsalis, though, this is another Negroid, brothers that always say good stuff for the white man, though. They get to play downtown, so they do jazz shows for $400, though, so you can't bring your kids, right? Pretty much jazz has become something that it's not really for the people. It's played incredibly, but when you go downtown, when you have to go downtown to West 66th Street and pay $400 to see a jazz show, that's out of pocket, though. It's out of pocket. It's become black bougie classical music when it really should just be the classical music that we made here. But he came into the news because he said, there's a headline in Ebony. He said rap is more damaging than Confederate statues. And off the surface, though, people that love hip hop will get mad, but I think anything that's living and being produced is going to be more damaging than a statue, because most people that walk by statues, they don't care what's there. They don't read a statue. They don't look at what a statue means. They don't say, hey, look, this is Robert E. Lee, though. That was some son of a bitch right there. Look what he did. They just walk past it, though. Urinate on it if you can. But he said a couple of things. He said, my words are not that. No, let me rewind. He said that he believes hip-hop's more damaging to African Americans than statues of Confederate leaders who fought to preserve slavery, and these are some exact quotes. My words are not that powerful. I started saying in 1985, I don't think we should have a music talking about niggas and bitches and hoes. It had no impact. I've said it, I've repeated it, I still repeat it. To me, that's more damaging than the statue of Robert E. Lee. Oh, man, let's build about that for a minute right there. You know what I mean? because he said something that caught me as profound, though. You know, he's an artist and considered in jazz of this modern era. Some of his albums are considered, if you collect past the into the 80s, if you collect past into the 80s, into the 90s, definitely into the 90s, Wynton Marsalis's records are considered, some of them are considered essential. And again, they're not in my collection because I could give a damn about past that. But what's interesting here is that he's an artist that said that his words have been ineffective. You know, how weak is that? So maybe in this case, the statue is more powerful than his music. And maybe he's upset that rap is more powerful than the statues. You know, because here's why I say that. These are some immediate thoughts I said to someone, and I transcribed them down. I got them down here. The first thought I had was that I was actually telling my Earth, that's my queen, the other day, that I can't just tell people I love hip-hop. You know, none of us, though. We're listening to the Power Right show here. We're saying, listen, I listen to a hip-hop show. It's called the Power Right. If you say that to anybody on the street, the first thing they're supposed to think is, it's some dumb shit. He's talking about stupid stuff. It can't be about anything useful, and it's silly shit. You know what I mean? But to say that you just love hip hop as your genre, it's a word that means to the majority of this, all of the shit that's out doesn't represent any of my musical tastes. So if I said hip hop to someone, it wouldn't really convey what I'm saying. Here's what it would say, right? About what Wynton is really saying, though, when I got into that, because obviously I have to be more detailed on what I think about hip hop. But the destruction that he forecasted back in '85 has come to pass. That I admit. And the worst rap today is more immediately destructive than even he knows for sure. But the fear, this is the problem I have. When he was saying this, though, he said that music, that his words didn't have power, I was like, this is one of the great musicians, and his words didn't have power. I'm thinking, like, what's the point of progression of music by people oppressed if none of your words have any damn power? From '85 all the way to 2018, everything he's been saying, no one gave a goddamn about. So I'm saying, though, that we needed a better music. We needed a more toughy music. So I say this, though, right? There's a fear. The fear to not make music that curses, that's confrontational, that's countercultural, is the most weakling slave mentality I could ever think of. This hip-hop isn't just music, but more so, I see his point. I see that the more it is as a devastating weapon. This hip-hop is a devastating weapon. The problem is that we got to use it. We got to fight, we got to cut, we got to punch, we got to kick, we got to shoot with it, and we even have to kill with it. See, we've been oppressed from that 1985, he was telling us, to this 2018, and ain't shit changed. So that means that the weapon we're using, though, isn't to be faulted. It's that we're not using the weapon at all. We're using it horribly. So in this respect, hip-hop isn't really the fault. It's really the shooters that are the fault. The shooters that have this hip-hop gun. See, for me, right, in my mentality, you, the listener, and saying that this is a countercultural music, this is how I cover it, is that I'm saying this basically. Fuck great music. Fuck incredible music. The hell with songs that are mind-blowingly progressive. The hell with horns that I've never heard before. The hell with modal arrangements that are mind-blowing and change people's way of hearing things. It's all useless. That alone is a slave mentality. We need great music that offends. We need music that fights, that disrespects and fuels dissent and youthful action. We can't let go of the weapon, as Wynton is asking us and really pleading us, sadly pleading us over, like, what is it, 90s, 2000s, the 2010s, like after almost 30 years. We can't let go of this weapon. This rap out in the mainstream is so bad, and yet it is still high weaponry. You know what? The music today is so bad, and yet it's killing people. This is what he's saying. The music is horrible, and it has more power than the best music he could ever make. I want to use that bad music. I want to do something with that bad music, change it, fix it, make it rough. You know what I mean? Take it out of that weak state. You see, because we can't let that shit go. To go back to what? Let's say we go back to what music was when it was progressive before. The blues, which is the core of jazz, which is the foundation of really all black music. I'd say, and I agree, I forgot what writer this was. I think it was something Roberts. He wrote a book called Latin Music. And he said that the two major musics of this hemisphere that produce really all music is the roots are, he said jazz, but it really would be blues in essence, though, if you look at that father. And then it would be son, which is from Cuba. Those two musics are really like a large foundation to most of the musics that we hear in the Americas, really everything. And what happens if we got rid of this hip-hop? You know, we sanitized it, because that's what they're doing. We sanitize it. Then we go back to suggestive lyrics. We go back to simple generic metaphors to state our hells, and we get to songs with all the feelings, emotions, and the life we live stated as lovingly, as intensely as possible, like that. But that's weak. Who cares about great music after all of that? See, to me, there are near infinite crates that haven't been sampled that satisfy that. You know, one thing, a misnomer about hip-hop music, and part of that is because even this decade, what I call the Invisible Renaissance, has such great music. A lot of brothers haven't used the crates. They haven't used the crates. I said that the 70s, I was saying that the 70s are the greatest era of recorded music as far as multiple genres hitting peaks. You have a lot of classic rock. You have salsa. You have, I'm not going to say that's merengue's peak. I would call that the 80s. But merengue was great in the 70s. What else could we say? Soul music, obviously. Definitely the funk. Definitely the jazz. The avant-garde jazz and the merging the genres like jazz funk, jazz rock. You know, all the stuff that really Miles merged into. Soul jazz, all of that stuff. That's all in the 70s. And we already had that. And hip-hop wouldn't be here if it wasn't for that. And yet, contrary to what people think and what a lot of producers are doing, because I keep hearing the same samples, even with the quality music, there's tons of crates that haven't been touched yet. And I'm not even talking about crates from artists that I've never heard of. I'm talking about artists that are popular. You know that if you go into a crate, let's say I'm going to give you a guy here, because I think he's very misrepresented. So I see any of his samples in music after that, I'm taking credit for that one, all right? But I'm a big Jimmy Smith fan. And Jimmy Smith was one of the great jazz organ players, and he's the one that really took the Hammond B3 organ and really innovated it into jazz, and he made a lot of soul jazz records. If you watch movies from the 70s, 60s, and you hear like that cool organ music that sounds black, and you're like, that's an organ, but it sounds like a brother's playing it, it's most likely Jimmy Smith. And if you're trying to start with on the Sunny Side of the Street album. That's the mega album to start with. But most people haven't really mined Jimmy Smith, and that's a legend of jazz. You know, so you know, I mentioned Sketches of Spain. How many people have sampled that album? You know, people haven't even sampled the catalogs of legends that we know of real deeply, let alone anyone else, though. So to Winton, there's enough music. We don't need great music that doesn't say anything. We don't need a horn that is so hard that we have white folk in universities go, that horn was so blaring. It represents slavery, and it represents the clutches of oppression and trying to get out, and it represents the hanging. We don't need people to analyze a horn, to analyze notes. We need brothers to have rhymes. We need sisters to have rhymes and to say the shit right out. We need 400-word essays like Raz Kaz's, classic Nature of the Threat. You know what I mean? And for whatever people say, when Cannabis was babbling, right, because Cannabis does babble, he goes off. But when Cannabis rhymes for about 10 days straight, right? That's modern John Coltrane stuff. It's modern John Coltrane. You know, because let's be honest, unlike Miles, most of John Coltrane's catalog isn't really songs. It's just him ripping it and doing, catching a note and diving into a note and exploring something for 30 minutes. That's not, those aren't real songs. Like, you're not going to play it like you would maybe, like a Miles, let's say like one of Miles' late 50s ballads, you know what I mean? Like, you wouldn't play it like, my favorite ballad, Blue and Green, you know? So we got all that. We had the Sun Ra classic avant-garde records where, the creator has a master plan and they had a couple of lyrics and the fury of the orchestration and everything melded, and we got the ideas of Black Power. We had their album covers saying statements, Blind, Deaf, Dumb. We had all of those. Black Unity, right? No. We need something deeper. We need lyrics. We need Nas when he has whole statements, lyrical statements. So we need brothers like Spit Gems when they have whole songs talking about issues. We need Ka when he rhymes about whole visions of what it was like to be the claustrophobic reality of being in poverty and doing everything illegal to stay in that immensely or get out of it. We need the Cuban links. We need the spectrum, because in my Mount Rushmore, I got Rakim, KRS, G-Rap, and Chuck D. Because Chuck D and G-Rap are the spectrum. If Chuck D didn't rhyme all about this righteous stuff and social issues, political issues, then nobody else in the gamut would be there. Rakim is up here. He's up high spiritually. KRS-One is on every single wavelength. And over here on that other spectrum, the one that Winton is getting pissed off about, that's G-Rap. But if G-Rap didn't rhyme all that horrible shit in detail, all those horrible things, you wouldn't get the detail from all these great MCs, the Nas's. Let's put out the whole Queens. Everybody in Queensbridge. Everybody. Right? You wouldn't get the details of Cuban links. You wouldn't get the merging of what Rakim was doing, the merging of that with G-Rap, and get the whole saga of the Wu. And those details are something that one jazz horn isn't going to do. Once a scholar isn't going to listen to Wynton Marsalis's horn and start talking about the damn deficit and saying how his horn was fluttering like the deficit was, or was talking about police brutality though because it had a shrill on it. We need people to say this shit straight up, and we need a genius though. We need us to rediscover words, literature, all those things, and we rediscovered it through those MCs. You know what I mean? Now I got an MC MBA. I got my own league in my own head, and some guys that people love are real low point scorers, but they're in the mainstream. And man, Kendrick Lamar, he's scoring 15. That's it. That's all he's got. He's coming off the bench. But once he starts that fast shit and starts sounding like Kevin Hart, no, they wasn't ready, and there's a bit, and starts going fast, he's got to go back to the bench, though. You know what I mean? Jamal Crawford, he's got to get back to the bench, right? J. Cole's saying stuff, though, but he's scoring 12 points, though. Everybody's heard those lyrics before. Everybody's heard those lyrics. I got demos from the 2000s with the same lyrics that J. Cole's got. But somewhere out there, those lyrics are having more effect than somebody's horn, than somebody playing their guitar. You know what I mean? So we need all that merged in. We need hip-hop to progress and actually develop a more detailed music to go along with the lyrics. A better sampling, a more dangerous sampling. You know what I mean? Better crate digging. Because if we look at the guys that really dominate this era, that are more like off the spectrum, like into that lower level of mainstream, they're crate diggers. Alchemist, his productions, Ka when he comes out, Rock Marciano, the jewels in their work is the samples. I never heard those samples before. That's always the sample game. The sample game's strong. And when the sample game's strong, you turn the listener into a student. And he says, where's those samples came from? Man, we was playing some Grover Washington Jr. before in the studio here. I started getting his records because I was reading all the samples in Pete Rock and CL Smooth albums. Right? Because remember, Main Ingredient list all of them. And I was digging in the crates. I started collecting Al Green for sure, like deep, after I heard Iron Man. And I was like, oh, this is too much Al Green. It's too much Al Green. Once he did 260, right, and he sampled that little beginning of You Ought to Be With Me, I was like, I gotta get all of the Al Green collection. All of it, though. Not just like that Greatest Hits album I had. You know what I mean? And some people like RZA, they mined all of Willie Mitchell's catalog. That's Willie Mitchell, the producer. He produced Ann Peebles, Syl Johnson, Al Green. That old Southern soul with that hard snare, that hard snare. That you get Hollow Bones from Syl Johnson, right? In the Wu-Tang W album, you get Ann Peebles, right? That's I forgot the name of the song, but I forgot the name of her song. But that's Jizz of Liquid Swords. Not Fourth Chamber. It's Shadowboxing. Shadowboxing. You know what I mean? So we took that development. You know what's interesting, right? The problem with hip hop today is that it's devolving. And that's really the problem. I'll give you an example. In the 2000s, I looked like a damn fool when I was up in these magazines, and they said, look, you don't like these drums here? They're using 808 drums. That's hip-hop, right? Because Run DMC used that. The whole point was that he already used that, so that's whack. But they were using... You can't elevate a music if you use 808 drums the way Run DMC used them and then use them worse. Can't use them worse. And then today, they'll do a rhyme scheme, and we're supposed to be excited by it, but they're not doing it as good. It's not as complex. It stumbles. You know, I mentioned G-Rap, right? He must cringe when he hears some brothers rhyme fast today. You know what I mean? Because they fall over the bar. Like, if the bar was an actual relay race, right? Like, with hurdles, though, they'd be stumbling up, busting their legs up, right? You can hear clear mistakes and flows today. You know, they would go, look, I like the new trap shit. It has melodies and stuff. Okay, let's act like the music is good and then listen to it. Most of these trap guys are making so many mistakes when they do their own harmonizing, the most babyish harmonizing. They're making so many mistakes. I bug out. It's not even a harmony. It's off key. And then now they stay consistently off key, and now it's a good song. But I digress, though, right? Because now I'm pulling a Wynton Marsalis, though, but in hip-hop form. I'm hating on the music right now. The point was, though, is this. You know, there was one thing that Wynton Marsalis said after he said that, and this was the real jewel, and it's really like a bomb on him, right, that I was saying about Wynton. He said, they mentioned about Kanye and Kanye's slavery comments, and he dismissed them like it doesn't even matter because it's from Kanye. And he said this regarding those comments. He said, the quality, this is a jewel. I give Wynton this. He was a very intelligent brother. And he said, the quality of his thought is in the product he makes. So it was a dart. It was like his product ain't shit, though, so he ain't shit. You see that? You know, Wynton Marsalis don't want us to curse, though, but he just threw a curse, though, right? He just threw a dart, right? That's that passive-aggressive shit. We do hip-hop. We don't do passive-aggressive shit. You know what I mean? But the thing is this, though, is I agree with that concept. It's a concept I've always taught. If a man can't even pick the right drums for 10 years in a row, he's not going to tell me about no slavery. He's not going to tell me about what black folk need to do. Don't tell me about none of that shit. You know, and in this case, he said the quality of his thought is in the product he makes. For me, it's more like, what if that product is instead a true dynamic creation, and the things they say start some real shit? So the quality of a man's thought is in the creations he makes. What if we got back to the point where we respected someone's creation so much that we wanted to hear every thought that they had? You know, when I was a kid, my heroes, you know what I'm saying? Because I grew up in poverty, but I didn't grow up doing criminality. And so my heroes were Guru of Gangstar, right? Remembered Imperfection, and KRS-One. Guru because of the things that he was saying, the way that he said them, the way he carried himself, right? The principles that he advocated, like it was all about principles. And then it was KRS-One for the things that he was doing, that he could be a detailed scholar. You know, like we was also listening to My Philosophy. You know, when he in the video, when he stops My Philosophy and he starts to rhyme it, you know, like he's not just rhyming the verse there. He's actually looking at the camera and he's rhyming it a certain way where he's like, you didn't understand this though. I'm gonna teach you what you're missing here. This is what an actual rhyme is though. Like, look at how dope this shit is right here. I'm gonna educate you on what this is. He slowed down his articulation. You know, I didn't study scholars when I first started doing lectures. You know, when I got put to do ethnomusicology lectures, my mentor, Dr. David Traverso, he had me do lectures about ethnomusicology regarding hip hop, and I didn't have no, you know, I still was getting my undergrad, and I didn't study any scholars. There's no YouTube with no damn scholars. There's nothing to study, and I'm not gonna study, you know, the other man. I wanted to study our people. I just listened to a lot of KRS-One. His interviews, his diction, the way he spoke. You know what I mean? And so the quality of the creation made it worthy of that man to also speak on other issues. You see? And this is why, like, it's also even a disappointment for the journalists that today, if they respect what J. Cole and Kendrick Lamar are speaking, they don't have them really ask them about too many issues. They don't ask them about details and things like that. They ask them if they like this guy. You know, you like that guy? You like this guy? Who do you like in the game today? Who do you like in the game today? Do you like Tiger? Do you like Little Johnny Flip? Do you like Little Banana? Right? And then the rapper goes, yeah, I like all those guys. Those guys are great. They really sing well and sound like bitches the perfect way. Like, they do that bitch tone, and I could never do it. It's something. They do what they do, and I love it. So now there's nobody to say, look, this shit sucks. Keep me out of that damn conversation. You know? But to end this Wynton Marsalis thing, right? Because I could go all day, right? Because Wynton Marsalis reminds me of Stanley Crouch, though. You ever read the Daily News? Stanley Crouch used to have a column, though. He's a scholar that scholar. Let me rewind. Scholar. Scholar meaning somebody that got a degree and gets to write high convoluted things about a lot of other things that he read and didn't really understand. And then he tries to explain things that he didn't understand, though, with even bigger words that we won't understand. That type of scholar. So he'd always have articles about how Tupac is ruining black people's lives. This is when Tupac was alive and stuff. You know, if you were a New York Daily News reader, you know. But, so I digress away from Wynton Marsalis, though. Get your game up. Get your game up. You know, too many of these brothers, even in this decade, that rhyme, a lot of guys rhyme weak. Like, they don't want to say, you know, stop keeping it generic. You know, the white folk, they're going to buy your record anyway. Just stop keeping it generic to them about, oh, it's about bars and whack MCs. Is there a planet with whack MCs? Like, when the police come, is it whack MCs that shoot at us? You know? I don't see niggas go, yo, rest in peace to my nigga Johnny. He got shot by a whack MC. These whack MCs aren't killing anybody. There's no whack MCs that are rhyming, that kill people, do any of that shit. You know what I mean? But we keep talking about that. We keep talking about that. Let's have real issues mixed in with that. Let's have the battle bars. Let's pick a better enemy. Let's pick all the enemies. You know what I mean? And a lot of the best records are doing that, you know? But let's go to another segment here. You know, last week I opened up with one segment. This week I want to open up, and obviously I'm in that mood. I keep talking about jazz and all that stuff. I'm going to have a segment that I do every now and then because there's going to be so many I can't do all of them every week, every episode. But this particular segment, I could do this segment all the time. I'm obsessed. But this segment is going to be called Classic Crates. And I'll just be talking about a crate that I love, just for the hell of it. And also how it relates to hip hop. I'm not going to be snitching. Today's Classic Crate is blank, and it was just used on her record, right? Honey De Niro's record. That's snitching. I'll talk about something else. Something that, if I mention stuff right now, it's because, like, whosampled.com already snitched. You know what I mean? It's because when you go to the song on YouTube, there's somebody that already posted and said, "Yo, this was on this song here," and they already gave it away. So don't do the Premiere stuff. Don't get DJ Premiere on me and yell at me. But since it's the first one, Classic Crates, I'm gonna start with an entire genre of music, because a lot of this is the foundation to a lot of my themes that I've been writing on for years. The entire genre of salsa, right? The reason it's important to hip hop, and the reason I start with this whole genre for hip hop, is because salsa is really the first urban genre of New York City. Okay, it wasn't hip hop. Okay, and one of the things that, so we go back to KRS-One. If you guys ever read Gospel of Hip Hop, that's an 800-page book, The Gospel of Hip Hop by KRS-One, and it's actually really an incredible read. It's got some really interesting metaphysical ideas. The ideas of, like, projecting thought consistently throughout, like, decades of yourself. That made no sense what I just said. Kind of like if you talk to yourself, like, what I will be when I'm in my 50s, I will say it now. And what happens is you end up doing those kind of things. So he had, like, metaphysical ideas on that nature. Because I just said some shit that didn't make any damn sense, and it'll make less people read the damn book. But it is an exceptional read. It's a wild read too, and sometimes it sounds a little stupider over time, because KRS-One says that the foundation of hip-hop started with the Martin Luther King "I Have a Dream" speech, and for the likes of the almighty mystery God in the sky that no one will ever be able to find or see or hear, I can't really figure out how that's a real reach. You know what I mean? That's like Dennis Rodman 30 rebounds reach. The way, but he connects it all, though, which makes it even more. It makes it an interesting read. But if you ever pick up that book, right, or if you ever in an actual bookstore, that if they still exist and have this book, skip through and read the last chapter, right? Just for our conversation here. The last conversation is about his history of hip hop. And by the way, KRS-One has some really intriguing ideas about historians and stuff. And I actually have this old interview from 2007 I did with KRS-One, and we talked about history and being a historian and stuff, and a lot of that ended up, I'm not gonna say it came from there, probably not. These are probably thoughts he already had written down that I was just extracting out of him just because nobody asked him things like that. But KRS-One, he has some interesting ideas about history. But in this last chapter, it's not about the concept of history and history writing. It's actually a history of hip-hop. And he says something this is going to relate to salsa and things like that. He says that hip-hop was more needed in its creation, that it was made by what I've always said, by the Afro diaspora, the African diaspora, that is the African American, the blacks from the English Caribbean, blacks from the Latin Caribbean, right? So the entire African diaspora, right? And that includes all you Latinos, though, that are just like bulking and bulking right now and going, I'm not black and bullshit like that. Stop all that. You know what I mean? If you ever read New York Ricans from the Hip Hop Zone by Raquel Rivera, it's disappointing that I was the only Latino brother, Boricua, right, Afro-Arawak, to actually have the nerve to say that I don't bear witness to this whole separation, that we are of the African diaspora. I'm not gonna be one of those Latinos that go, I like French blood. Then make me a croissant. You know what I mean? Take me to Paris, though. They can't do any of those things. We know how to make African dishes. We know how to make cassava. We know how to do things with plátanos. Right? We know how to make tortona. We know how to do things with rice, just like the way African people do things with rice. I've never been into no Dominican's house and get a damn croissant. Okay? In fact, I've never been into a Haitian's house and get a damn croissant. Okay? Ask that for me. And please, somebody let me know if a Haitian has ever given you a croissant. Like, ça passe, this is my new croissant here. Or is there a Haitian restaurant that serves croissant? Oui, ha ha, right? Put milk in everything, right? But the thing about it, right, is that in that book, New Yorkers from the Hip Hop Zone, and I'm going on tangents here to make a point here, right? Was I was saying that we're all from the African diaspora. Gospel of hip hop, the gospel of hip hop in the diaspora, right? He talks about that the people of that diaspora that created hip hop and calls them co-creators. Mind you, there are scholars that, like Imani Perry, and she's not white, so don't blame her on that. She actually says that hip hop is a black creation, African American creation, and that Jamaicans didn't really have a part in it like that, a significant part in it. Even though roots reggae and all its earlier forms all have that baseline groove that is essential to hip hop. The entire toasting is essential to hip hop. The entire speaker system that's essential to hip hop. If you eliminate Jamaica, we've got some other kind of music. We have a different kind of music, you know? But still, KRS-One says that the most important thing is it was most important to African Americans that they needed hip hop more than anyone else. You see? So if African Americans needed it more than anyone else, one of the reasons that's the case, though, is because this was a countercultural music. That's why I said countercultural. It goes against the establishment, and at its highest form can go against the prevailing concepts of the entire populace, the majority populace, right? So, if we look at the other genres that were burgeoning, that of the people that were foundational as co-creators of hip hop, it's only the African American that was losing touch with having a music that could express themselves. The funk was already waning; it was getting discoed out, right? Remember, disco was ruining stuff because you wouldn't have musicians, you wouldn't have bands, you could have everything done in the studio, and you just basically had a singer as a forefront, and the band could be eliminated. So their voice was being lost. You know what I mean? That is, unless you think Gloria Gaynor's a real builder. You know what I mean? Those are gay anthems at best, though. Those are not, like, they're not detailed enough where all black people are like, oh, this is so profound. You know? Yeah, I remember back in the days when J&R Music World, it used to be so weird. We used to be on pause because the hip-hop section where the CDs were, right behind you was the gay music section. You know what I mean? And then one time, there was a dope record on the gay side. And I was like, this shouldn't even be here. If you're not talking about gay issues, why is it in the gay section? Gloria Gaynor wasn't making gay music, so it just was their anthem. I Will Survive. So I'm like, yo, I want to get that. And I'm like, I'm on the gay side. You know what I'm saying? Like, hey, yo, like, but the thing was, it was behind, you know? But that's just a flashback thought. But the genres around 1970s South Bronx, already there, were pretty countercultural. The roots reggae that Kool Herc is coming out of and that whole influence has probably the greatest countercultural musical icon we could ever think of, Bob Marley. The legend of Bob Marley. And then all the others from Burning Spear on down, right? This isn't just music that's militant. This is classic music that is also militant. And then you have salsa. Because salsa comes from son, right? Which is from Cuba, and it's more set in tone and everything. It ends up having a very structured format, right? The reason this is important in hip hop is because the evolution to the process to hip hop, not evolution. I don't want to say it's evolution per se, even though I think it is. But let's say just say the process goes from musicians not being able to have a connection to older musicians to teach them how to play and pass things down. So you get musicians that don't really play that well, so they rebel and they play out of tune, and so they make their own tunes inside new wavelengths because they're breaking all the rules. That's where salsa comes from. A lot of these musicians, unlike Boricuas, Puerto Ricans, and Cubans that came in the 1920s that were very well schooled, you had a lot of music that wasn't being passed down. So you get a lot of Boricuas in the 70s that start salsa. They're adding jazz tones to it, meaning that they're improvising. That's the core of jazz, improvising. So it's off son. Doesn't have the structure son has. And then with their wildness, they're also playing the shit all messed up. But in playing it messed up, they're also fixing it by fixing the grooves with the funk, like Roberto Roena and others. And it evolves into some. Willie Colon is merging different Latin genres and African genres into salsa. Eddie Palmieri's going deep into jazz and improvisation. So we have the first urban genre is salsa. So I implore you to go check that out because it has that rebelliousness. They would talk about street stuff. They were talking about hood ideas. They were talking about all that stuff. And they had rhymes, too. They rhymed as if they had battle bars. That's why we don't call them salseros, a salsa singer. We call them soneros. So it's a different term. So, if you follow Willie Colon, Ray Barreto, Rowena, who I mentioned, soneros like Hector Lavoe, Cheo Feliciano, Ismael Quintana, these are lyricists. Check them out. Group Sonora Ponceña, Gran Combo, On the Island, Off the Island. But anyway, that concludes the classic crates thing. I love giving the classic crates and starting off with that genre because once the instruments are played in a way that is rebellious and we will find our own way to tune them, we'll find our own way to make notes and we will progress them ourselves, what happens after that? What happens after that, though, is that the oppression continues and you get a Harlem and a South Bronx that doesn't have any instruments at all. And then that's where hip-hop comes in, and actually had to make their own instrument, Just like the way, if you read works like Grandmaster Flash's autobiography and you see how he was such obsessed with looking at old machinery that was in dumpsters and stuff, and he would just play around with them, open them up, see what was going on, though, And this type of innovation made our own instruments that we have today. So if you don't know about salsa in any kind of way, then what you don't really get is that before hip-hop guys like Melly Mel, Grandmaster Flash, Furious 5, and all of them, and Busy Bee and all of them were performing down on Jerome Avenue, those clubs were filled with Lavoe and all those other guys playing on Jerome Avenue. And let me tell you something. When I used to build with some of those old salsa musicians, right, they had stories in those clubs that sounded like Ray and Ghost. You know what I mean? Like shooting their way out of Bennigan's, you know what I mean? They had stories like that. So it just was, amazing, the prelude, the succession of it all, you know what I mean? I think if people like Hector Lavoe were alive and made music today, he'd probably be cursing up a storm, though, because his live performances he cursed up. You know what I mean? But that's my GOAT, so I got to use him as the example, But, for the rest of the show, we got about 10 minutes here. And for the rest of the show, I want to go through some albums that I have not reviewed in premierhiphop.com that I find exceptional, give people a ranking of stuff. And I'll mention the ones that I reviewed as well, just so you get a sense if I'm in it. But I got kind of like now, because I don't like ranking records. I don't like doing grades. Let me tell you something. A lot of rappers, when you write reviews and give grades, a lot of rappers will cry about a fucking grade. Give me a 5. It's a classic, though. It's like, it's not a fucking classic, You just rhymed about battles and being the best for like 40 minutes, you know what I mean? Smoking blunts. But these are loose power rankings. Because the only time I rank records is in the reel at the end of the year where I do the reel of 2000 blank. So it'll be the reel of 2018. It's the only time I'll rank records in order, and I only do that so people get a sense of what I find should be the most important thing you look at. But I hate ranking albums, though. There is no. You could say what you thought was the best record or the best three, but the best record that is number 10 and number 12, that then it starts to lose its sting, and I hate it though. I find it offensive too because I think that music has all types of levels. You know, I say jokes about battle bars, but there are some MCs that just have battle bars, and it's such a work of art. It's such a stylistic work of art that it works. Or that and then there's others that are real deep and profound that they may lack in flow and everything like that, but it's so crucial what they're saying, and the music is so good, it elevates. So, but here's some albums, right? And I'll loosely mention the ones that I already wrote about. I got here in these power rankings. These got to shift though. These got to shift. But last week, obviously, the last show we had Undeniable, and I definitely would put them in the power rankings because very unique album. I don't know where it would rank, obviously, and it's a review I intend to write because there's so much that they did there stylistically. Very subtle. They're very subtle MCs. Their styles, you don't see it at first. You have to listen a little bit longer. You know what I mean? That definitely I would put. Ill Conscious, the prerequisite. I wrote a review about that. The God is bars. Lyrical bars are definitely like a very verbose and a lot of dexterity. And I wrote about him. C. Ray's Walls, of course. C. Ray's Walls, I think, is one of the GOAT MCs as far as like his catalog, as far as a guy with a deep catalog people are not talking about. A stylist that is also lyrical with lots of concepts. That's very rare. And I think I put C. Ray's Walls in GOAT candidate territory because his live show is extraordinary. It's extraordinary. That's all I got to say about that because I've written about it too. His album and his live show. The album is I Love C. Ray's Walls. We'll be talking about this more. Napoleon the Legends, Path of Warrior. One of our shows to come, we'll have Napoleon the Legend, so we're going to build about that. So I'm not going to talk about him. You have to wait for that. We got Planet Asia. I got to build with Planet Asia earlier this year. He got a video out for one of his songs, and I'm in there, talking shit with DJ Toshi. And that's one of the best albums. And I think Planet Asia, something happened when 2010 came because I attribute it to the album he did with DJ Muggs in 2008. For some reason, when you get Muggs beats, it opens you up. And after that, he was opened up to build on the knowledge and all the issues he knew about, but also kind of explore the abstract styles he had. And when you listen to him, though, a lot of times it's just like you're bugging off just his word choices. Sometimes he'll do battle bars that don't really say much as far as like a theme. But his word choices would be so crazy that you're like, wow. And that's why the Anchovies records with Apollo Brown, that's probably why he did it like that. Had Apollo Brown give him tracks that didn't really have breaks because he wanted to isolate that technique he was doing. Hey, look, I got here my favorite pop rapper because, I get asked who's my favorite pop rapper, though. So if you perform at the White House, then I get to use you as my favorite pop rapper. So it's Common, okay? And he was in movies, too, so he used Common, though. Because, like, when I hear Common now, he's dope. But then I also feel, like, weak. You know what I'm saying? I feel weak. Like, I'm not tough enough anymore. Like, I'm listening to Common. It's like, this is soft, though. Like, because he's doing soft things. He's not doing whack things, but he's doing soft things. And then I get mad. I got to put Sean P. Got to put Illa G back. Everybody like that. But Common has an album with Robert Glasper and Kareem Riggins. And for all joking aside, though, the music those two brothers have is exceptional. It's real jazzy. It goes deeper into what they were exploring with Black America. That album. Where the jazz licks get a little bit more profound. And Common really knows how to rhyme. A lot of people think they could rhyme off stuff like that, but he's a real expert. In the beginning of his career, I loved Common because he always had a brashness, a confrontationalism, a confrontational nature, but he also had an ability to really be on key. You know what I mean? Like be inside the in the pocket. You know. And in this album though, you don't notice it because they're grooves. They're grooves. They're not really hard breaks. They're grooves. And he's in the pocket lovely. You know what I mean? It's an album that I definitely got to write about. Nobody's not talking about it because he got so commercial that nobody down low is going to talk about it. And then everybody at top, unless you want to go to the gentrified spots of Brooklyn, then we could talk about, hey, have you heard August Green yet? That's the new, you know what I mean? And they might talk about it, take you home and everything, you know? But if you get lost and shit like that, right? I actually didn't write also about this one. I didn't write about Sky Zoo yet because Sky Zoo gets written about a lot, and I like to write. Sky Zoo sparks a lot of wordplay for me, my own stuff. So I like to write something profound, and I also want to say something about Sky Zoo that's different. I have nothing to say. Reading his lyrics is enough. He's one MC that people think that they catch, but they're not really catching. He's not just playing with homonyms, like one word can mean a million things. He's doing a lot of other techniques, but what you catch is the homonyms. And of course, he's one of the masters, you know, of the pretty hiccup. So every rhyme is like, yeah, I'm doing it. Yeah, so, yeah, Sky Zoo, SKYZO, you know, it does all that shit. And it's usually from the failing dark ages, like Fabulous and everything like that. But with Sky Zoo, you actually get lyrics, though, you know, because I'm sorry to say, listener, but the Fabulous records, they have no longevity. No longevity. You know what I mean? Oh, look, I was there when Holla Black. Embarrassing. I don't want to tell my kids that that was the shit I was listening to. You know what I mean? All right, fine. I scooped up my wife. I scooped up your mom with Fabulous. Not going to work. But there's other albums. I'll leave one last album I intend to write about. OC's A New Dawn. His last album last year was so good that this one, the beats didn't hit me until I listened to it deeper. But this album is one I'm actually writing about it now. A lot of jewels on that. You know what I mean? And one of the best MCs that I could think of. And I think that OC, like Planet Asia, I feel like he's getting better. Because he's so comfortable in just being a window to everything he sees. You know, there's some MCs that when they rhyme, they seem like a window. And that's why we love Nas so much. They have that windowed effect where they give little details, you know? They give you point of contact details, you know? Spit the phlegm in a street. Like I just say spit the phlegm in a street, and I can get anybody rhyming that Illmatic verse, you know what I mean? And that's a detail. It puts you in the path of what he was doing. It makes you picture the concrete, you know what I mean? But earlier this year, they also I wrote about Don Pacino's album. I wrote about New Jerichans, the Boricua brothers from New Jersey, dope album. Shabam Shabbi Timeless, I wrote about. Also, Elzai and Crisis, their album, Jericho Jackson, I think it is. Is it Jericho Jackson? Yeah. What the hell does that mean? I gotta research that. I forgot what it meant, why they called it that. There's a reason why they called it that. But a very good album, though. Elzai is a real lyricist, Detroit brother. And there's another MC from Detroit that you should be taking instead of buying that Eminem shit you're buying, you know? But if you like rhyming auctioneers, but then you mess with Eminem. Again, there's a lot of other albums. I'll leave this one as last, though. Nomadic, The Journey. He's a Latino brother. I forget where he's from. Very dope. You know what I mean? And that pretty much concludes it, though. Other albums I would mention, other EPs like Zagnif Noise and stuff I would mention. But that I want to mention things with detail because that's what this show is about. The Power Right show is about having power, but also giving some right to it, you know? And we could learn a lot from what we was building about Wynton Marsalis, though. You know what I mean? Take this music back, though. Use it as a weapon. Use that weapon. It's harmful. It is harmful, Wynton, and we're going to use it, though. We're going to shoot everybody. What we should do is use rap to shoot up all of West 66th Street and make those jazz concerts a little bit less. He's charging $400 for a jazz concert, but he's dissing rappers. Come on now. And as always, though, this is your brother Sunya Allah, Skillustrated Slow, and as always, a never respect fake broadcast. Peace.